Advent is a kind of in-between time. Theologically, we're in the in-between time between the coming of Christ in the beginning, about a little over 2,000 years ago, and the final coming of Christ at the end of time, when he comes in all his glory and the world will come to an end and will be gathered up into Christ, theologically. Experientially, in our consciousness, we might more say, well, Advent's the time, in-between time, between Thanksgiving and Christmas, and there's all sorts of stuff that we have to do. So that's that in-between busy time. True as that is. And there is a lot to do. It's also an in-between time where we kind of concentrate more on, at least we're called to, concentrate more on how we celebrate Christ in our lives. And in the midst of all that we have to do, it's still a time of waiting. It kind of focuses on that or highlights that time of waiting. Waiting for things like in line at the cashier, or waiting in traffic, or for those who care, waiting to see if the Vikings are for real. And if they can really beat the Packers. More seriously, there are things that we wait for in life which are much more important and reach deeper into our lives. An example might be that those who are in depression or who have ever been in depression, I don't mean a down day or two, I mean depressed. They wait for the day when they can laugh again. And they wonder, will I ever laugh again? Will ever my heart be light enough to come through with a good cleansing laugh? Because I can't see it now. I'm waiting and hoping for that day. Or for those who have under an illness or under a serious injury, they can be waiting for the cure, for the healing to take place. And in the midst of it, they're waiting for the pain to go away. Or waiting to regain their strength and wondering, will I ever feel good again and wake up without pain? They're waiting. Or there's also those who have had something go wrong in a relationship. And we'll say more about that later. But they're waiting and wondering, well, can we ever put this back together? Waiting for someone to make the move because things aren't going right now very well. And I feel kind of heart sick about it. So those are some more important waitings that we have. And I'm sure you can think of more. For what are you waiting that makes any difference? In Advent time, it's a time of waiting with hope. As we heard in that first reading from the book of the prophet Jeremiah, God says through the prophet that God will fulfill his promises to do what is right and just. He will fulfill his promises. Maybe not in our timing or in exactly the way that he wants, but he said, I will be there to do what is right and to just and to fulfill the promises I have made to you insofar as I have made you for the fullness of life. And so that's what we do in Advent, and it's what we are called to do throughout all of life, is to wait for those things we just have to wait for, but to wait in hope. And what are we to do? How is it that we live when we are waiting for hope? And that's where Jesus in the gospel comes in really handy, where he says, do not let your hearts become drowsy through drunkenness or carousing or other kind of mindless, useless things like that, silly things. Or do not let your hearts become drowsy through the anxieties of daily life. Because when we let that happen, The anxieties of daily life, for example, happen in our lives, and we get so concerned about those things, we forget about what is most important and what to look for. And that's too often the temptation because it's immediate. But rather, Jesus calls us to live in the present day, doing what we believe and know to be good, that will bring us to where we want to do and attend to those things which are more important, to be steady in living out our faith. And I'll just give you 2 examples among many that we could talk about. One is from a widow who, after her husband died, she said, "I was so undone and so immersed in grief that I could not pray." And she was known to be a woman who went to church regularly and prayed there and prayed on her own, but she found that she could not pray anymore. She felt alone and abandoned and isolated, dry inside. But she said, "I went to church anyway. Even though I couldn't pray, the people in church prayed. And they prayed through their singing. And the meaning of those words kind of entered into my consciousness. They prayed for me. And they will never know how much of its strength it was for me to be in their midst, having them pray and support me, even though I couldn't come up with the words." I suspect there might be some in here today who don't have words, but they're here. We pray in our faith, and it supports them. Continue praying in the midst of what it is we hope for. The second example is that what I mentioned briefly earlier, where something's gone wrong in a relationship. Now, as a friend, I'm not married, but I'm a friend, and of some people, deeper friends, some, and it just appears kind of inevitable that sooner or later, in any important friendship, you come to a critical point. Something happens. It could be a hurt, it could be a slight, it could be anything. And something needs to get straightened out. Well, I hear tell that even happens in marriage. Is that true? I guess that's a yes. That something happens. And there are several ways we could deal or not deal with it. One is to kind of try to sweep it under the rug and pretend that it didn't happen, just kind of walk around trying to pretend like everything's okay, but inside we have a hurt which is growing or anger which is burning inside of us. And we can end up coming out with living with each other in a hostile, icy coldness, or in hostility that breaks out over some little thing that happens, but all of a sudden there's just a whole lot of anger, and the other person's going, "What is this? I know it's anger. What's going on?" Or they can grow apart, start ignoring each other, and live in the same house, 2 people living together alone, passing each other, and never dealing what's most important to their hearts, to their lives. And Jesus says, "Do not let your hearts become drowsy. Wake up and attend to the present." What do? Well, what I found is a really good thing to do is to pray about it. Lord, something's really going wrong here. And I don't know how to do this. I pray that you give me the words, but even more importantly, I pray that you give me the ears and an open heart to hear, because I need to talk to this friend of mine about it. And maybe what we say is something like this: "I'm kind of hurting inside, and I'm not blaming you, but there's something I need to talk about. And maybe we can work this out so that our relationship can grow, and we can grow back together instead of being two people alone who are growing apart. Do not let your hearts become drowsy, but rather be vigilant and attend to what is most important in our lives. In prayer and in faith, asking for God's guidance. And that happens in many other areas of our lives as well, where he says to us, don't become drowsy in life. Don't fall asleep. So in Advent, we find ourselves in the in-between time. And in the in-between time, we are to prepare for the coming of Christ. And when we attend to what is most important, when we attend to our prayer and attend to the people and what's most important in our lives, then by the time we get to Christmas, we'll be ready to celebrate once again Christ's presence in this world. Christ's presence in our hearts, because we'll be open and receptive to Him more. And we'll be able to celebrate with those whom we love, and finding the presence of Christ in the hearts of all those that we are called to love.